Her high school reunion photos proved she was someone else entirely before me. That sounds insane, I know. Like something out of a twisted movie, right? But it's real. Every word of it. And it's eating me alive, day by day. Before we dive any deeper though, I need you guys to do me a favor. Seriously, it means a lot. If you're feeling this, if you're already hooked, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe. We're putting out stories like this, raw and unfiltered, every week. Share this with someone you think needs to hear it. And definitely drop a comment below. Let me know what you think, what you do. Your feedback is what keeps this going. It started, I guess, the night before her reunion. Sarah, my Sarah. She'd been talking about it for months, this big thing, 30 years. She was excited, nervous, a weird cocktail of both. She spent hours in front of the mirror, trying on outfits, tossing them aside. We live in this quiet little suburb outside of Denver. Nice house, good schools for the kids, the whole 9 yards. White picket fence stuff, if you want to get cliche. But it's real. It's my life. My stable, comfortable, predictable life that I'd built brick by painstaking brick. And Sarah was the mortar holding it all together. Or so I thought. She was 38, looking maybe 32. Always has. Great genes, always took care of herself. Smart, funny, sharp as a tack. We met in college at CU Boulder. History major, same as me. We bonded over dusty textbooks and late-night study sessions fueled by cheap pizza and even cheaper coffee. Fell in love fast, hard. The kind of love you read about in novels, the kind you think only happens in movies. We dated for 3 years, then got engaged, then married. 10 years of wedded bliss. 2 amazing kids, Emily, 10, and Jack, 7. Summers at the lake, Christmas mornings, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. My world. Our world. The reunion was in her hometown, a few hours south. A small place called Harmony Creek. Never been. She said it was the kind of town where everyone knows everyone, and everyone remembers everything. She'd gone through a lot of changes since high school, she'd always said. Moved away for college, lived in New York for a bit, then Chicago, working in marketing. She'd been different, more wild, she'd hinted at once or twice, with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. I never pushed. Why would I? We had our present, our future, and that was more than enough. The past was just that. Past. The night before she left, she was a bundle of nerves. She kept pacing, rearranging her makeup bag, checking her itinerary for the 10th time. I was trying to be supportive, making her tea, telling her she'd look amazing, reminding her that everyone changes. I was trying to be the good husband. I was wearing my comfortable worn-in jeans and a faded Denver Broncos t-shirt, the kind of thing I usually wear around the house. She'd looked up at me, her eyes a little too bright. "What if they don't recognize me, Mark?" she'd asked, her voice barely a whisper. I'd pulled her close, buried my face in her hair, which smelled like her usual expensive shampoo, and something else, something faintly floral I couldn't quite place. "They'll recognize you, sweetheart. You're Sarah. My Sarah." She just held onto me tighter, a little too tight. She drove down Friday morning, promised to call when she got there, and she did. Checked in, said the drive was fine, that she was checking into the hotel and would see everyone at the informal welcome thing that night. Sounded normal. She sent a few texts throughout the weekend. A blurry picture of a cheesy appetizer, a selfie with a woman I didn't recognize but who looked vaguely familiar in a way I couldn't articulate, captioned, "Reunion Crew." I texted back, told the kids I loved them, asked her to bring me back some of that local fudge she liked. Everything was as it should be. The house was quiet, too quiet, but I filled it with work calls and the kids' chatter when they got home from school. Then came Sunday, the day she was supposed to come home. She'd said she'd leave right after a brunch thing, maybe around noon, and be back by dinner. I'd picked up her favorite takeout, a Thai place we both loved. The kids were excited, asking if Mom brought them any souvenirs. The clock ticked past 5, then 6. No Sarah. I tried calling, went straight to voicemail. My gut started to twist. Not in a bad way, not yet, just a little tight. Maybe traffic, I told myself. Maybe she stopped to see someone. She'd always been a little spontaneous. I was making the kids' dinner, wrestling with a stubborn jar of pasta sauce when my phone rang. It was her. My heart did this weird fluttery thing, a mix of relief and annoyance. "Hey, you're late," I said, trying to keep my tone light. Silence. Just static. A low hum. "Sarah? You there?" More silence. Then, a man's voice. Not loud, not angry, just there. "Mark? Is this Mark?" My blood ran cold. It wasn't a friend's voice, not a familiar colleague's. It was
Measured. Too measured. "Who is this?" I managed to ask, my voice suddenly rough. "This is Detective Miller," he said, "from the Harmony Creek Police Department. I'm afraid I have some news about Sarah." And that's when the floor dropped out from under me. They found her car abandoned on the side of a deserted country road, miles from the hotel, miles from anywhere. Empty. No sign of a struggle, no note. Just gone. The next few days were a blur of police interviews, sleepless nights, the kids asking questions I couldn't answer. The entire town, it turned out, knew Sarah, knew her from back then. But the woman they were describing, the stories they were telling, it was like they were talking about a ghost, a different person. The police showed me her things from the hotel room, her suitcase, her toiletries, her phone. Her phone.
That's where it started. They'd recovered it from the car, unlocked. My heart was hammering against my ribs as I scrolled through her contacts, her messages. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then I saw it. A folder titled HRO, High School Reunion. Inside, not just the casual invite and the hotel confirmation. There were hundreds of photos from the reunion itself. And there she was, Sarah, laughing, dancing, talking to people. But in all these photos, she looked different. Not physically, not drastically. It was something in her eyes, a lightness I hadn't seen in years, a spark. And she was wearing clothes I'd never seen her in. These glittering dresses, these tight form-fitting outfits, the kind of things she never wore. She looked happy, unburdened, like the Sarah I'd fallen in love with in college, but amplified, more vibrant, more alive. But then, as I kept scrolling, the unsettling feeling grew. She was interacting with people, but not in the way a married woman with 2 kids would. There was a flirtatiousness, a freedom that made my stomach clench. She was leaning into men, her hand lingering on their arms. She was laughing a little too loud, her eyes a little too wide. And there was this one guy, older, maybe late 40s, salt and pepper hair, a confident smile. They were practically inseparable in half a dozen photos. In one, he had his arm around her waist, pulling her close for a selfie. In another, they were dancing, his hand resting on the small of her back. Her head was tilted back, her eyes closed. It looked intimate. Very intimate. I showed the photos to the detective. He just looked at them, his face impassive. "She was popular," he said, his voice flat. "Some people reconnected these things." Reconnect. This looked more like a rekindling. My Sarah would never. My Sarah was devoted. My Sarah was mine. The thought was so deeply ingrained, so absolute, that it felt like a physical blow to even consider otherwise. But the photos, they were undeniable evidence of a Sarah I didn't know, a Sarah who was apparently very comfortable with other men, too comfortable. Then I found a text thread, buried deep, dated from a week before the reunion. It was with a contact saved as D. The texts were short, cryptic. "Almost time. Can't wait. Will it be like before? Better." And then, the day before she left for Harmony Creek, one last hurrah. A single tear rolled down my cheek. One last hurrah. What the hell did that mean? It sounded like a farewell, a goodbye. Not to me, not to our life, but to this other life, this life in the photos. I went back to her computer, her personal laptop. I'd always respected her privacy, never snooped. But now, I was a man possessed. I found her social media accounts. She'd been mostly inactive for years, just occasional updates about the kids or family vacations. But then I found it, a hidden album, on Facebook, marked private. I clicked. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate the mouse. And there they were. More photos. From her high school reunion. Not the one she just attended, the one from 10 years ago. The one when we were already married. And in those photos, she was with the same guy. D. He looked younger, but it was him. His smile, the way he held himself. They were at a bar, laughing. In another, he was kissing her, right on the mouth. And she was kissing him back. My world imploded. 10 years. 10 years of what? Of me, the devoted husband, the loving father, while she was, what? Living a double life? Reconnecting with old flames?
The betrayal was a physical pain, a suffocating weight in my chest. I felt nauseous. I felt sick. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut by a phantom. I kept digging. I found old emails, a correspondence between Sarah and Dee from years ago, right around the time we were married. They were talking about running away, starting over. He'd offered her a life, he'd said. A life without the constraints, without the expectations. And she'd considered it. She'd actually considered it. I saw her replies, hesitant at first, then more confident. She was weighing her options, weighing me, our future, against what? Freedom, excitement, a past she clearly couldn't let go of. The police called again. They'd found something, a lead, a witness who'd seen a woman matching Sarah's description getting into a dark-colored SUV on the outskirts of Harmony Creek, miles from where her car was found. Alone, not forced, getting in, voluntarily. I looked at the photos of her with Dee, the way they looked at each other, the ease, the undeniable connection. It wasn't just a fling. It was something deeper, something that had clearly survived the years, the distance, the marriage, the children. And then I looked at the photos from this reunion. Her eyes, that vibrant spark. It was the same spark I saw in those old photos with Dee, the same spark I hadn't seen in her for a long, long time. The woman in those photos, the one laughing with Dee, the one looking so carefree and alive. She wasn't the Sarah I knew. She wasn't the Sarah who tucked our kids into bed at night. She wasn't the Sarah who held my hand during scary movies. That woman was a stranger, a ghost from a past I'd never known existed, a past that had apparently been waiting in the wings, ready to reclaim her. And then, I found it, tucked away in a deleted folder on her computer, a draft email to Dee. It was dated 2 days before she left for the reunion. It's time. It read, I can't do this anymore. I need to be free. I need to be me. Meet me at the usual place. I'll explain everything. The usual place. The usual place. The implications hit me with the force of a tidal wave. She hadn't been kidnapped. She hadn't been harmed. She'd left. She'd planned it. She'd orchestrated her own disappearance, her own escape, and she'd done it with him.
My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragmented, horrifying puzzle. Her high school reunion photos from 10 years ago proved she was someone else entirely before me, a person who had secretly maintained a connection with another man. And the photos from this past reunion, the ones I just seen, showed that connection, that spark was still burning bright. She hadn't just been reminiscing, she'd been actively planning. I sat there, in the quiet of my empty house, the photos spread out on the dining room table, the damning email still glowing on the laptop screen. The kids were asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware of the seismic shift that had just occurred in their world. My world. My stable, predictable, loving world. It was gone, shattered, replaced by a reality so alien, so devastating, I couldn't even begin to comprehend it. She hadn't just cheated. She'd erased me. She'd erased us. And the most terrifying part, I had no idea who she was anymore, or where she'd gone. The reunion photos weren't just proof of a past she'd hidden. They were proof of a future she'd chosen without me. And I was left with the wreckage, the suffocating guilt of my own naivete, and the cold, hard certainty that the woman I loved, the woman I built a life with, had never truly been mine at all. The questions burned. Was this planned for years? Was she seeing him even before we married? Was everything a lie? And the deepest, most gut-wrenching question of all, who the hell was Sarah, really? And what had I been married to for the last decade? The silence in the house was deafening, amplifying the chaos raging inside me. The abyss she'd left behind felt bottomless. My breath hitched, the screen's glow a stark contrast to the encroaching darkness outside. The usual place,
The words echoed in the cavernous space where my trust used to reside. What usual place? Some secret rendezvous point from her past? A romantic hideaway from her old life? A life she'd clearly never shed? The emails, the texts, the photos, they painted a picture of a meticulous deception, a long game played with devastating precision. It wasn't a spontaneous decision, a moment of weakness. This was premeditated, a calculated escape. And I, Mark, her husband, the father of her children, had been nothing more than a convenient placeholder, a comfortable life she was finally shedding like a worn-out coat. My mind reeled, replaying every subtle shift in her demeanor over the years. The times she'd seemed distant, lost in thought. The late nights attributed to work. The sudden business trips that now felt suspiciously like clandestine meetings. Had she been packing her emotional bags long before she packed her physical ones for that reunion? Had she been compartmentalizing her life so effectively that I, the person who shared her bed, her meals, her children's milestones, had remained utterly oblivious?
The sheer audacity of it, the level of control she'd exhibited, was both horrifying and, in a twisted way, almost impressive. A master manipulator. And I, the trusting fool, had been her unsuspecting audience, her unwitting co-star in a play where I was cast as the oblivious supporting character. I scrolled back through the emails, searching for any hint, any breadcrumb that could lead me to this usual place. There were a few more scattered references in older exchanges, vague allusions to a spot and hour time. It was like trying to decipher a coded message, a language of intimacy I was never meant to understand. Every word, every phrase now felt loaded with hidden meaning, a secret handshake between Sarah and this phantom man, D. He was more than just a lover. He was a confidant, a partner in her secret life, the one person she felt truly understood her, or at least the version of herself she desperately wanted to be. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I had to stand up to pace the living room, the familiar space now feeling alien and suffocating. The kids' drawings were still taped to the refrigerator. Emily's latest masterpiece, a bright, sunny depiction of our family at the beach. Jack's scribbled rendition of a superhero. They were anchors to a reality that felt increasingly fragile, a reality that Sarah had just detonated with a single, carefully worded draft email. My kids, what had she told them? Or more terrifyingly, what would she tell them? How could she abandon them? The Sarah I knew, the mother who doted on them, the woman who agonized over their every sniffle, wouldn't do that. But then again, who was the Sarah I knew? I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over my wife's contact. What would I even say? Where are you? And who the hell is Dee? The futility of it all settled in. She was gone. She had made a choice, a definitive, irrevocable choice. And I was left here, holding the shattered pieces. The detective's words about the SUV, about her getting in voluntarily, it solidified the horrifying truth. She hadn't been abducted. She had walked away. My gaze drifted to the photos from the reunion. Sarah, radiant, laughing with Dee. The woman in those pictures looked so much like the Sarah I'd loved, but also so entirely alien. It was like looking at a familiar face through a warped lens. Her eyes held a fire I'd witnessed flickering but rarely blazing in our own home. Was that fire always meant for someone else? Had I been a convenient arrangement, a stable port in a storm she felt compelled to weather before finally setting sail towards her true destination? I remembered one of her college professors, a gruff but brilliant historian, telling us that history wasn't just about facts and dates, but about motivations, about the hidden currents that drove people. I thought he was just being academic. Now I understood. Sarah's motivations had been hidden from me, buried beneath layers of practiced normalcy and quiet domesticity. She'd been living a bifurcated existence, one part meticulously curated for her family, the other a secret garden where her true desires bloomed. The sheer volume of deceit was overwhelming. The 10 years of marriage, the children. Was it all a performance? Had she ever truly loved me? Or had I simply been a good provider, a safe harbor, a father for the children she wanted? The thought was a bitter pill, impossible to swallow. I'd loved her with an intensity that felt like it could move mountains. I'd believed in us, in our story. But now it felt like I'd been reading a beautifully written novel, only to discover at the very end that the author had been subtly manipulating the narrative, leading me to believe one thing while orchestrating another. My hands clenched into fists. Rage, hot and visceral, began to simmer beneath the surface of my despair. It wasn't just the betrayal, the infidelity. It was the deliberate, calculated erasure of my existence from her narrative. She hadn't just stepped out, she had orchestrated a complete exit, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a life that was now a hollow shell. The photos, they were the smoking gun, the evidence of a truth I had been too blind, too trusting to see. The gap between the Sarah I thought I knew and the Sarah in these pictures was a chasm I couldn't bridge. I found myself staring at the contact photo on my phone, a smiling Sarah, taken on our last vacation, her arm casually draped around my shoulders. Her smile looked genuine, happy. But now, knowing what I knew, I saw a flicker of something else in her eyes, a carefully masked anticipation, a longing for something beyond the frame. Was that the real her? Or was this just another masterful portrayal? I couldn't tell anymore. The lines had blurred. The truth had become an elusive phantom. Then, a new thought, a chilling realization began to dawn. The reunion wasn't just about reconnecting with old flames. It was the catalyst, the ignition point for a plan that had been simmering for years. The emails to Dee, the hidden photos from 10 years ago, the draft email, it all pointed to a long-standing intention. She hadn't just been tempted, she had been waiting for the right moment to shed her current skin and embrace the one she'd shed years ago. And the reunion, with its potent mix of nostalgia and opportunity, had been the perfect stage. I started scrolling through the texts on Sarah's phone again, the ones from the reunion weekend. I dismissed them as normal, casual updates, but now, with the knowledge of the draft email, of Dee, I reread them with a gnawing sense of dread. Reunion crew. Was that a coded message to him? A signal that she was in position? The blurry photo of the cheesy appetizer. Was it a deliberate misdirection? A way to present a mundane reality to me while her true activities unfolded elsewhere? Every seemingly innocuous message now felt like a tiny, polished stone in a trail of breadcrumbs leading to her betrayal. My gaze fell back to the draft email on her laptop. I need to be free. I need to be me. The words were a confession of sorts, a brutal indictment of our marriage. She felt trapped. She felt like she wasn't living her true life, and I, her husband, had been the embodiment of that confinement. The guilt, already a heavy burden, intensified. Had I suffocated her? Had my love, my desire for a stable, predictable life become her cage? But even if that were true, even if I had in some unconscious way contributed to her unhappiness, it didn't excuse the path she'd chosen. It didn't justify the years of deception. I opened another folder on her laptop, one I'd barely glanced at before. It was filled with documents, travel itineraries, booking confirmations. Not for our family trips. These were different. Dated for the past year, spread out over the last 18 months, they were for flights, hotels, rental cars, all booked for cities on the East Coast. Places like Boston, Philadelphia, even a small town in Vermont. Cities she'd never mentioned visiting, for work or otherwise. Why? A cold dread seeped into my bones. Was Dee not local? Had she been conducting a long-distance affair, flying to meet him, creating new, usual places all over the country? The thought was so sickening, so profoundly unsettling, that I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. The sheer scale of her double life was beginning to dawn on me. It wasn't just a mistake, a momentary lapse. It was a sustained, elaborate, and deeply committed deception. I started opening the travel documents, my heart pounding in my chest. The dates, the locations, and the names on the bookings. Not Sarah. Almost always it was booked under a different name. A woman's name, but not hers. Sometimes it was just a first name. Emily, Jennifer, Megan.
Who were these people? Were they aliases, or were there other women involved, unwitting participants in her elaborate escape plan, perhaps providing cover or acting as intermediaries? The complexity of it was dizzying. Then I found it, a single, standalone PDF file. Not a travel document, a scanned copy of a driver's license. Not Sarah's. It was a woman's face, a young woman, maybe early 20s, with bright, hopeful eyes. And the name? The name was Sarah Miller. Sarah Miller. My Sarah's maiden name was Collins. This woman in the photo was also named Sarah, and her last name was Miller. Dee was Detective Miller. Was this Dee her father, a brother, an ex-husband, a new husband? My mind raced, scrambling to connect the dots to make sense of this new, terrifying revelation. I frantically searched for more information about Dee. His full name.
His background. I found his LinkedIn profile. Daniel Miller, a successful architect, lives in Boston, divorced, no mention of any children. But there was a photo. A younger Daniel Miller, but unmistakably the man in the reunion photos. The man with the salt and pepper hair and the confident smile. And next to him, in one of the older photos, was a woman with dark hair and eyes that held a familiar spark. A woman who looked eerily like the woman in the scanned driver's license, the woman named Sarah Miller. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. Dee wasn't just some random guy, he was Daniel Miller. And Sarah Miller, was that his daughter? Or perhaps his ex-wife? The reunion photos showed Sarah, my wife, with Daniel Miller, and the scanned driver's license showed Sarah Miller. It was too much of a coincidence. Was it possible that the Sarah at the reunion, the Sarah who had been so close to Daniel, was also Sarah Miller? Had she been married to him before me, and had this reunion, 30 years later, been a rekindling of that old flame, a forgotten love resurfacing? But then, the draft email. I need to be free. I need to be me. And the photos of my Sarah in those glittering dresses, looking so uninhibited. The texts to Dee. Will it be like before? Better. It all pointed to my Sarah, the Sarah Collins I married. But what if? What if Dee was her first husband, and she had been Sarah Miller when she was married to him, and then she divorced him, married me, and changed her name back to Collins, or maybe kept Miller as a legal middle name, a secret she never revealed? No, that felt too convoluted, too impossible. Unless she was more than just Sarah Collins to Daniel Miller. What if she was Sarah Miller, and my wife was living under an assumed identity? No, that's insane. My Sarah Collins was the daughter of Robert and Eleanor Collins. I'd met them. I'd been to their house. I'd been to family holidays. They were her parents. They'd raised her. This new Sarah Miller, this woman on the license, couldn't be her. Could it? Then I saw it. A small, almost insignificant detail on the scanned driver's license of Sarah Miller. A date of birth and a place of birth. Harmony Creek, Colorado. The same hometown as my Sarah's reunion. My Sarah Collins' hometown. The same hometown where the detective, Detective Miller, worked. And the same hometown where Sarah had gone for her reunion. It was all converging. My breath hitched again, a choked gasp escaping my lips. The reunion photos weren't just of my wife with another man. They were of my wife with Daniel Miller, a man whose name mirrored the name on the driver's license and whose hometown was hers. And the woman on the license, Sarah Miller, born in Harmony Creek, just like my Sarah. Was it possible that my Sarah Collins, the woman I married, the mother of my children, had a secret identity? That she was Sarah Miller, perhaps his ex-wife, or even, God forbid, his current wife. And I had been living a lie for the last decade? The notion was so outlandish, so deeply disturbing, that it threatened to shatter my sanity. I stared at the photos of my Sarah, her face alive with a joy I hadn't seen in years, her hand resting on Daniel Miller's arm. The intimacy in their gaze, the unspoken history between them, suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. She hadn't just reconnected with an old boyfriend. She had reconnected with a man who was intrinsically linked to her past, a past that was now starting to look like a carefully constructed fabrication. The scanned driver's license of Sarah Miller, born in Harmony Creek, felt like a key to a Pandora's box I was terrified to open. Who was the Sarah I married? And who the hell was Sarah Miller? And what did Daniel Miller have to do with her, with my Sarah, beyond the shared hometown and the unsettling name coincidence. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, and the silence was no longer just empty, but filled with the echoing questions of a life built on an unknowable truth. The cliffhanger wasn't Sarah's disappearance anymore. It was the terrifying realization that I might not even know who I was supposed to be looking for. The room was a museum of our life, each object a silent accusation. Emily's unicorn drawing was still stuck to the fridge, its glitter long since shed, much like the sparkle in my own eyes I suspected had vanished years ago. Jack's superhero sketch, crayon battle-scarred, sat beside it. I could almost hear their laughter, a phantom soundtrack to a life that felt like it was dissolving before my eyes, like sugar in hot coffee. Sarah had always been the one to frame their artwork, to curate the visible evidence of our perfect little world. Now the fridge was just a refrigerator, holding milk and leftovers, its decorative facade stripped away to reveal its mundane metallic core. The gap between the life I thought we had and the one she was living, or had been living, was a canyon, and I was standing on the precipice, the wind whistling a tune of utter desolation. I walked over to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass, watching the streetlights bleed into the humid night. A car idled at the corner, its headlights cutting through the gloom. Was it her? Was she watching? Was this some twisted game, her observing my unraveling from a safe distance? A final act of cruelty before she vanished completely. The paranoia was a venom spreading through my veins, making my skin crawl. I'd always been the steady one, the anchor, the guy who believed in the inherent goodness of people, the sanctity of vows. Sarah had chipped away at that belief, piece by agonizing piece, with every evasive answer, every rushed explanation, every subtle withdrawal. And now the final blow. Detective Miller. Sarah Miller. Harmony Creek.
It was a tapestry of deceit so intricate, so meticulously woven, that I still struggled to accept its reality. I replayed the detective's words in my head. She got in the SUV voluntarily. We confirmed her identity. Confirmed her identity. What identity? Sarah Collins, wife of Mark, mother of Emily and Jack? Or Sarah Miller from Harmony Creek, with a past that included a Daniel Miller, an architect in Boston? The scanned driver's license. That was the linchpin, wasn't it? A physical piece of evidence that screamed of a dual existence, a double life I had been blissfully, ignorantly oblivious to. I had the woman's face, the name, the birthplace, but the connection to my Sarah, the woman I'd married, was a phantom limb, an ache that refused to dissipate, a ghost I couldn't exorcise. My mind kept circling back to the reunion, the excitement in her voice when she talked about it, the weeks leading up to it, the sudden interest in reconnecting with old friends. I dismissed it as a harmless trip down memory lane, a chance for her to recapture some youthful exuberance. Now it felt like a meticulously planned rendezvous, a strategic re-entry into a life she'd never truly abandoned. She hadn't just gone to see old friends, she'd gone to reclaim a part of herself she'd buried, a part that belonged to Daniel Miller, to Harmony Creek, to Sarah Miller. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through photos. Our wedding? A young Sarah, glowing, her eyes full of a promise I'd believed implicitly. A vacation in the Rockies, her hair wind-blown, laughter lines around her eyes. The birth of Emily, her exhausted but radiant face holding our tiny daughter. The birth of Jack, the same miracle, the same overwhelming love. Were all these moments tainted now? Was the love I felt, the life we built, just a carefully constructed set? A stage upon which she played the role of devoted wife and mother, while her true self, her true affections belonged elsewhere? The thought was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. It was the ultimate betrayal, not just of our vows, but of the very essence of shared history, of mutual experience. If she was Sarah Miller, and Daniel Miller was a significant figure in her life, then what was I? An elaborate detour, a comfortable, well-appointed holding pen until she could return to her true love? I remembered a conversation we'd had a few months ago after a particularly stressful week for her at work. She'd been quiet, withdrawn. I'd asked if something was wrong, if she was unhappy. She just sighed, a heavy, weary sound,
It's just, sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life, Mark. Like this isn't quite me. I'd attributed it to work stress, to the pressures of modern life. I tried to reassure her, to tell her she was amazing, that she had a great life, a loving family. If only I dug deeper, if only I'd seen the desperation in her eyes, the truth she was too afraid or too ashamed to articulate.
The Sarah Miller on that license, with her youthful optimism, was she the real her? And the Sarah Collins, the woman I loved, the mother of my children, was that just a costume she wore? A role she played? The word reunion gnawed at me. It wasn't just about seeing old faces. It was about rekindling old flames. And Daniel Miller, the architect, the man in the reunion photos, the man who was apparently significant enough for Sarah to carry a scanned driver's license of another woman named Sarah Miller, was the core of it. But the driver's license wasn't hers. It was a different Sarah Miller. So where did that leave my Sarah? Was she Sarah Collins, a woman with a secret past that involved a man named Daniel Miller and a possible former identity as Sarah Miller? Or was she Sarah Miller all along, and the Collins name was the fabrication? I opened another folder on her laptop, one labeled Personal. It was mostly old scanned documents, school reports, vaccination records for the kids, and then I saw it, a scanned copy of her college transcript. Sarah Elizabeth Collins. Her parents listed as Robert and Eleanor Collins. It confirmed what I knew. She was Sarah Elizabeth Collins. So the driver's license of Sarah Miller was from someone else. But then why was it in her laptop? And why did the detective, Detective Miller, show up in Harmony Creek, her hometown, at the same time as her reunion? The name was too much of a coincidence. My heart hammered against my ribs. What if Daniel Miller wasn't just an old flame, but something more complicated? What if Sarah Collins, my wife, had a connection to Daniel Miller that went deeper than a simple hometown acquaintance? What if the driver's license of Sarah Miller was a crucial piece of her own past that she had meticulously buried? What if she had been Sarah Miller before she was Sarah Collins? And the reunion was her opportunity to revisit that life with Daniel Miller, the man who was clearly still significant to her. I went back to the reunion photos. Sarah, radiant, laughing with Daniel, her arm around his. The intimacy was palpable. And then I zoomed in on Daniel Miller's profile, the man in the reunion photo, the architect, Daniel Miller. I searched for him online again, this time looking for any mention of a previous marriage, any public records that might shed light. I found a brief mention of him in an old local newspaper article about a high school reunion 30 years ago. The article listed attendees from Harmony Creek High, and there among the names was Daniel Miller and Sarah Jenkins. Sarah Jenkins. Not Sarah Collins, not Sarah Miller. Jenkins. Harmony Creek. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Jenkins. Where did that come from? I frantically searched for Sarah Jenkins, Harmony Creek, and Daniel Miller. I found a few grainy photos of a high school prom from 3 decades ago. A young Daniel Miller, a mop of dark hair, a shy smile. And beside him, a girl with bright eyes and a warm smile. Her name etched in the caption, Sarah Jenkins. My world tilted. My Sarah. Was she Sarah Jenkins all along? And the driver's license of Sarah Miller, was that a red herring or a deliberate misdirection? The detective, Detective Miller, was from Harmony Creek. Was he related to Daniel Miller? A brother? A cousin? And the scanned driver's license of Sarah Miller, was it a prop? A piece of evidence she'd found or planted to make this whole thing more confusing, to obscure the truth? I sat back, my head spinning. The sheer complexity of it, the layers of deception were suffocating. Sarah Jenkins, Harmony Creek, high school sweethearts with Daniel Miller. Then, somehow, she became Sarah Collins, wife of Mark, mother of my children. And now, in Harmony Creek, at a reunion, she was seen with Daniel Miller again. And the driver's license of Sarah Miller, a woman who might or might not be connected to Daniel Miller in some way, was in her laptop. I remembered Sarah's evasiveness about her past. Small town, uneventful childhood, loving parents. She'd always been vague,
painting a picture of a quiet, unremarkable upbringing. It was the kind of vagueness that, in hindsight, screamed of something hidden, something she didn't want me to know. The reunion wasn't just a reunion. It was a carefully orchestrated escape. And Daniel Miller wasn't just an old flame. He was the gravitational center of her past, the magnet that pulled her back. My hands trembled as I opened another file on her laptop. It was a travel itinerary from 6 months ago, a flight booking, not to Boston, not to Philadelphia. It was for a small airport near a town called Havenwood, Oregon. And the name on the booking was not Sarah Collins. It was Sarah Jenkins. The breath left my body in a ragged gasp. Sarah Jenkins, the high school sweetheart from Harmony Creek, the girl in the prom photo with Daniel Miller. She had used her maiden name for this trip. Why? Why would she fly to Oregon under her maiden name if she was Sarah Collins, happily married to me? And the detective, Detective Miller. Was he Daniel's brother, trying to help his former love escape her current life? Or was he a private investigator, hired by Daniel to track her down, to make sure she was ready for their reunion? I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a fundamental disconnect. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was a stranger who had meticulously crafted an identity, a history, a family, all while her true self, her true name, and her true desires were hidden away. The driver's license of Sarah Miller was still a mystery, a tangled thread in this Gordian knot. Perhaps she had used that name for some other clandestine purpose. Or perhaps Daniel Miller had a wife named Sarah, and my Sarah was the other woman, the one he'd always loved. The possibilities were endless, each one more devastating than the last.
I looked at the draft email again. I need to be free. I need to be me. This wasn't about a momentary lapse. This was about a lifetime of yearning, of suppressed identity. She wasn't unhappy with me. She was unhappy with the role of Sarah Collins. She needed to be Sarah Jenkins again, or maybe even Sarah Miller if that was the truth of her past. And Daniel Miller was the key to unlocking that past, to reclaiming that lost self. The reunion wasn't a catalyst for a new affair. It was a portal back to her original life. I scrolled through more photos on her laptop. Old photos. Photos from Harmony Creek. Photos of a young Sarah Jenkins, beaming, her arm around Daniel Miller, their faces impossibly young, impossibly hopeful. And then, tucked away in a subfolder, I found it. A scanned copy of a marriage certificate, dated 28 years ago. Daniel Miller and Sarah Jenkins. The world went silent. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, all of it ceased to exist. Daniel Miller, Sarah Jenkins, married. My wife, my Sarah. It was her, the Sarah Jenkins from the prom photo, the Sarah Jenkins who had married Daniel Miller. My Sarah Collins, the Sarah I married, was Sarah Jenkins. She had divorced Daniel years ago, and then, for reasons I couldn't fathom, she had taken a new name, remarried me, and built a completely new life, burying her past so deep that even I, her husband of 10 years, had no idea of its existence. The driver's license of Sarah Miller was still an enigma, but it no longer mattered as much as the foundational truth. She hadn't just cheated on me, she had fundamentally deceived me about who she was. I opened the draft email one last time. I need to be free. I need to be me. It wasn't a confession of guilt for an affair, it was a declaration of liberation. She was escaping a life that wasn't hers, a name that wasn't hers, a role she could no longer play. And Daniel Miller, her first husband, was the gateway back to her true self. The reunion wasn't just a romantic rekindling, it was a homecoming. She hadn't left me for another man, she had left me to return to the woman she had been before she became Sarah Collins. The rage was gone, replaced by a profound, crushing sadness. It wasn't the pain of betrayal, not exactly. It was the sorrow of realizing I had never truly known the person I had shared my life with. My love, my trust, had been placed in a phantom, a carefully constructed facade. The children, Emily and Jack, what were they to her now? Were they part of the life she was leaving behind, or were they a bridge she hoped to maintain, a connection to the life she had perhaps intended to be permanent?
The thought of them, innocent and unaware, being torn between two worlds, two mothers, was unbearable. I closed the laptop, the click echoing in the silent room. The pieces were all there now, laid out in stark, brutal clarity. Sarah Collins was Sarah Jenkins, who had been married to Daniel Miller.
She had reinvented herself, married me, had our children, and then, at the first opportunity, she had gone back to her past, back to Daniel, back to herself. The driver's license of Sarah Miller remained an unanswered question, a piece of a puzzle I might never fully solve. But it felt like a detail, a secondary layer to the seismic revelation that the woman I married was a ghost. I walked into our bedroom, the room that had once been a sanctuary. Her side of the closet was empty, the hangers clacking together like loose teeth. Her perfume still lingered in the air, a faint, cloying reminder of her presence, a scent that now felt like a lie. I picked up a framed photo from her nightstand. Us, on our 10th anniversary, smiling. Her eyes looked happy. But now, knowing what I knew, I saw a flicker of something else in them, a guardedness, a sadness, a longing for a life that wasn't mine. She hadn't lied to hurt me. She had lied to survive, to build a life she felt she deserved. And in doing so, she had erased me from her story. I was no longer the husband, the father, the partner. I was just a chapter in a life she had decided to close, a chapter she had meticulously edited and was now finally ready to discard. The silence in the room was absolute, a vast, empty space where love and trust used to reside. I was left standing in the ruins, a solitary survivor of a life that had been, all along, a beautiful, heartbreaking illusion. The last exhale was not one of relief, but of a profound, bone-deep understanding of loss.